Good evening, everyone. My name is Daquan Llewellyn, and I serve as the District Director to State Senator Leroy Comrie. Thank you all for joining us and on this event on protecting your property. We're here joined by esteemed panelists from different organizations that you will hear throughout the entire time of the program. I also would love to give the opportunity to have our State Senator Leroy Comrie give a few remarks before we dive into this well conversation. And before that, I would love to just give some housekeeping rules. We will be holding Q&A at the end of the presentations. So please do use the chat section to put your questions in. We'll have Fedrice Latchman, which is one of our staffers, who will be monitoring those for responses. And just so forth, you can also use the hand raise signal when we do reach to the Q&A portion. Also, just be mindful that when you do join, keep yourself on mute so we can make sure that everyone hears the information that being shared today. With that said, I would like to introduce our State Senator Leroy Comrie for a few remarks.
Thank you, Daquan. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this important conversation on protecting your property and planning for the future. I'm Senator Leroy Comrie. I'm honored to be your state senator, and I'm proud to partner once again with New York State Attorney General Letitia James, Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz, the New York City Department of Finance, and our outstanding community partners to bring you this opportunity today. Home ownership is one of the most important investments that families make. And it's critical that we protect that investment, especially for our seniors and longtime homeowners who have worked hard to build stability for themselves and their families. And because of today's costs, they find themselves underwater. Too often we hear heartbreaking stories of residents losing their homes or being taken advantage of through deed fraud, scams, or poor estate planning. These crimes don't just take property, they rob families of generational wealth. Tonight's discussion is about empowerment. It's about giving you the tools and information to safeguard your assets, understand your rights, and make informed decisions for your loved ones. Whether you're a homeowner or caretaker or someone helping a parent or neighbor navigate these issues, this conversation hopefully will be helpful for you. Again, I want to acknowledge and thank our Attorney General, Letitia Tish James, for her leadership and tireless work in protecting New Yorkers from fraud and exploitation. Also to District Attorney Melinda Katz, who's been a great advocate for justice and accountability here in Queens. I also want to thank the New York City Department of Finance, Build Up Justice New York, Hopkins Law Group, I see Brother Hopkins on, and all of our local organizations who have made tonight's webinar possible. Um, their dedication ensures that our communities remain informed and secure. Please take notes, ask questions, and make sure to register for any follow-up resources shared during the webinar. Knowledge is power, and when our community is informed, we are better equipped to protect what we've built. Please don't hesitate to reach out to my office if you have any concerns or issues or any follow-up that is not expressed that you can't get resolved this evening. My office will always be there to try to help and work with all parties that are on the webinar on a consistent basis to protect, inform, and enhance our community. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Daquan Llewellyn from my office. I want to thank my staff, Daquan, Fadrice, and Jada. I think I heard on it, but just had to put this webinar together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. At this time, I would like to welcome our first panelist, who from Department of Finance, Carol Mahoney, Director of Outreach. Just a little background. Carol Mahoney Director of Outreach at the New York State Department of Finance. Department of Finance Outreach team has organized 100 of outreach events over the past few years to provide information and assist property owners in applying for property tax exemptions, rent freeze, and more. Today, would love for Karen to expand on the ideas of exemptions, property evaluations, current charges and property taxes, fees, and penalty. And I will pass it over to you for furthermore.
Great. Thank you, Daquan. And thank you to Senator Comrie and all of our panelists here today for this conversation. So as Daquan mentioned, my name is Keir Mahoney. I'm the Director of Outreach here at the New York City Department of Finance. I've been with the agency for about 3 years or so. Some of you that are on this webinar may have seen my face before because we've partnered with Senator Comrie's office in the past. And I will say, I might be biased given the presentation, but I will say Senator Comrie's office has been a phenomenal partner in this effort in regards to homeowners throughout the city. So I just want to give a special shout out to your office because you guys have been phenomenal partners throughout the past few years. So some of the stuff I'm going to go over here today is in regards to your property taxes. Kind of just a quick overview of how we're not going to get into the weeds of how they're assessed and everything like that. But really try to get to how you can save money on your property taxes. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all really want to know is how we can save money. And then I'll get into some information about, any sort of outstanding charges or anything like that in terms of payment plans. And then just a brief summary of what we have in terms of deed fraud as well. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and get this going. Let's see. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So the first I'm going to go over here, something that all property owners in the city of New York receive in January is something we call the Notice of Property Value, commonly referred to as the NOPV. So what this document is, it's a 4-page document that informs you of the Department of Finance's assessment of your property for the coming tax year. So you'll receive this in January, and this is going to be an estimate of your taxes for the coming July, right? Because the tax year runs from July 1st to June 30th. All right. So it's a simple 4-page document. You'll see the property value, the market value, and assessed value on the first page. At the bottom of it, you'll see the taxable value times the tax rate. That will give you your estimate. On the second page, it gives you more of a breakdown of the assessment and how we kind of get to that number. So we take your market value, then we determine your assessed value. Then we get what we call as your effective market value, which favors people in the city of New York because they are capped at 6% each year. Then we factor in any exemptions you receive, and then that's how we determine your taxable value from there. All right. The third page I always like to bring people's attention to when you receive this notice, because these are the descriptive details of your property. So this shows your square footage, the lot square footage, your depth of the property, how many units you may have if it's a multifamily, things like that. Because that can really determine what your property taxes are. If you have, if it's saying if you're a 4-family property, but it might only be a 1 or 2, that could be a big difference, things like that. So just be mindful of that when you receive this notice. At the bottom of the third page as well, you'll see change from the current year and then to the upcoming year. So you'll see what the change in the market value and assessed value is of your property there. Then on the last page, you're going to find information about where to get help, right? So similar to how we are talking tonight, we're going to have 5 borough-wide NOPV events that we hold throughout the 5 boroughs. We have several with Senator Comrie's office within the district alone. But the Queens one will probably be at Queensborough Hall again, but you'll receive that notice in the mail. We'll probably do that around February at that event. Okay. So the biggest thing I'm going to get into here is really the ways to get help and to answer any questions you have in regards to your notice. So all the information I mentioned, you might look at it and say we got something wrong in the Department of Finance, right? So you have the option to discuss with assessors or anything like that in regards to your market value, assessed value, and any descriptive errors on your property. You have the right to challenge any assessments and correct erroneous information associated with your properties. When the time comes, the filing period is not open yet. Probably, again, when you get your notice around mid-January up until these deadlines, this is what you're going to be looking for. If you disagree with your market value, you're going to be looking for the request to review. Those deadlines for tax class 1 properties, which is, I know, a majority of Senator Comrie's district, that deadline is going to be March 16th. If you have any changes you want to make for the descriptive property information and data, that's going to be a request to update. There's no deadline on that. You can do that at any time. And then any errors in regards to the property assessment or property tax calculation, there's no deadline on that either. You can do that on a rolling basis. So now the fun stuff, ways to save. These are our property tax exemptions. So property tax exemptions reduce the assessed value before your taxes are calculated, while abatements reduce your taxes after they've already been calculated. In terms of most of the city, when we talk about abatements, the real big abatement we have is the co-op and condo abatement for co-op and condo properties. I'm a Queens kid, so I'll say a lot of Queens I know has like a lot of co-op and condos. That's where you're going to be more familiar with the abatements. But generally, you're going to be focusing more on the exemptions. So now, these are some of the exemptions that are available for property owners in the city. So we have our senior citizen and disabled homeowner exemptions. For the senior citizen exemption, you have to be 65 with an annual household income below $58,399. For the disabled homeowner exemption, there is no age limit. Or age minimum, I should say. But you do have to show proof of disability. That's through various levels of either SSDI or any sort of disability income that you are receiving. And the income cap there is also $58,399. So what these do, they can reduce your assessed value of the property by up to 50% based off of what your income is. Okay. Next, we have the veteran exemption. So the benefit here varies based off of the time of service. But it's for any veterans, unremarried, surviving spouses, and Gold Star parents. If you have friends, neighbors, or even yourself that is a veteran that is not taking advantage of this veteran exemption, I strongly suggest you do so. Okay, please do so. Any way to save you money, I want you to take advantage of it. Okay. And then we have a disabled crime victim and Good Samaritan exemption. This is not as common, but it's for crime victims and those injured trying to prevent a crime. This is only for civilians, not for law enforcement or anything like that. An owner must have a modified home to accommodate disability, kind of like a ramp or anything like that in front of their house. Okay. And then we also have a clergy exemption. So it's available to members of the clergy and their unremarried surviving spouses that own houses or condos in New York State. This reduces the assessed value of the home by about $1,500, coming out to about $250 a year. Okay. But the bigger thing here are the senior citizen and the disabled homeowner exemptions. Those are the most common we have in the city of New York. The deadline for filing these, I know I see on the chart here, it's March 15th. Typically, it's March 15th, unless that falls on a weekend. Then the deadline is March 16th, 2026. Okay. If you currently have the exemption, either of the exemptions, you must renew the senior disabled or clergy exemptions. We notify you by mail. Some of you, if you have it, the mail should have gone out this week, I believe. So be mindful, get ready for it in your mailbox and get ready to return it back to us. Review all the instructions regarding eligibility and income requirements. And the application must be postmarked by March 16th. A couple updates for the upcoming filing period. For Shahi and Jahi renewals, you no longer need to submit income documents as part of the renewal. Also, if the property, this is a typo here, excuse that, please. But if the property is in a trust or life estate, in the past, you would have to submit the entire trust or life estate. Moving forward, we have a form where you can just check off that the property is in a trust or life estate. And then we will take it from there. Okay. So just some frequently asked questions in regards to property taxes and ways to save. How are my taxes calculated? It's a result of the calculation of the taxable value times the tax rate. You can check the taxable value on your NOPV. What can I do to lower my taxes? The easiest way to lower your taxes is for taking advantage of the property tax exemptions. A question we get often is, why is my property's market value higher or lower than the amount I can get if I sold the property? Tax class 1 homes use statistical analysis that incorporates data such as recent selling prices. Something we like to keep in mind for folks: the number that you see on Zillow may not be the number the house was actually sold for, right? So we use the hard data of what the property was actually sold for to make the determination of the market value. I already went over how to challenge. And another question that we receive is, why is my neighbor's assessment different from mine? As I mentioned before, I'm a Queens kid. I was in a semi-attached house in Queens, right? Our property taxes were very different than the neighbor we were attached to, right? But every property is different. There's different caps over time, and people have different exemptions. There's 1,000 different reasons why each property is assessed differently. All right. So at this time, I just want to go over a few more things that we mentioned. That's everything in regards to how we assess properties, also your property tax exemptions. Something we, have talked about in the past, and I want to mention for those, if you do have any outstanding property taxes, it's not the end, but we do have several options to assist with you as well. We do have a couple brochures in regards to property tax payment plans. Just a few notes that I do want to highlight. You can apply for property tax payment plans. We try to be as flexible with property owners as much as possible. Something to keep in mind is you stay current on your current plan while also making your payments towards your payment plan as well. Then you will not be able to enter into another payment agreement unless you can demonstrate extenuating circumstances if you previously defaulted, things like that. Okay. Those are just standard payment plans. The more you pay up front, the lower your payments will be. You can pay monthly, quarterly, for a term of up to 10 years for a standard plan. We also have a PTA payment plan. The payment of property taxes can be deferred for a fixed length of time. Defer up to 25% of the equity in your 1 to 2 or 3 family home, or up to 50% of equity in your condo unit. There are 3 payment plans within this umbrella. We have the low income, senior, fixed term income based, and then extenuating circumstances income based payment agreements. For this program, the total income for all owners cannot exceed $98,700. We also, relatively new within the past 2 years, we have this reduced interest rate payment plan, which again, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's just a reduced interest rate if your total income of all owners does not exceed $200,000, and the assessed value of the property is $250,000 or less. Okay. If you are currently in a PTA, if you will receive the reduced interest rate automatically if you have PTA or receive certain tax exemptions. All right. And here's another brochure that we have also too. I actually, last week at the senior month lunch, I had several of these brochures that thank you to everyone that showed up to that and wiped me out pretty quickly of all their brochures. So some of you on this call might already have these. But this is a quick brochure that we have in regards to preventing deed fraud. I know there's several layers and several people involved in regards to, I know the Attorney General, the DA's office, or Sheriff's office. There's a lot of different steps in regards to deed fraud. But we just want to make sure we're doing our part to raise awareness of this scam, basically, right? So what to do if you think you've been a victim of deed fraud? The biggest thing is act quickly, report the fraud to our Sheriff's office immediately. Get a certified copy of the fraudulent document on our city registrar's office. You can report the crime to your local DA, and then also consult an attorney to confirm ownership of the property. Okay. Some tips to prevent deed fraud, something that I know we have talked about before. We do send notifications anytime a deed is recorded on the property. So please be mindful of the mail that you receive from the New York City Department of Finance. Okay. Open it. Make sure, please, we send a lot of these notices out. So I know it could be a lot, but make sure you open them. Okay. Make sure you have the correct mailing address for the Department of Finance. And then periodically, you could also check our registrar's office online to make sure just to see, out of curiosity, if anything is there, if any changes have been made or anything like that. Just something to be mindful of. And you can learn more again on our website, nyc.gov/deed fraud. And I think some of our panelists will be discussing a little bit more about this as well. All right. So at this time, that wraps up everything I have on my end. Daquan, did you want to do questions now or save them all the way for the end? I forget how.
No, we will keep them for the end. But thank you so much
Okay.
for that thorough PowerPoint. I definitely took some notes of some stuff that you highlighted. Thank you for that. I wanted to now pivot to our next panelist. She is the Special Assistant for Housing and Community Development at the Office of the New York State Attorney General's Office, overseeing innovative housing policies and programs, as well as assisting with housing-related investigations. And I would like to open the floor to Carrie White.
Thank you, Daquan. I appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. I'm from the Office of the New York State Attorney General. I work on a lot of housing issues, as Daquan just said. Among them, I work on some of our homeowner-related work, including overseeing the Attorney General's management of the Homeowner Protection Program, or HOP. I also work on the Protect Our Homes initiative, which is the work that the AG's office has taken to combat deed theft and other homeowner fraud. So I'm going to talk a bit about deed theft. I am going to share a PowerPoint, if I can get it. Isn't it? If I am not able to share, I will hopefully be able to at least put some of the information in the slides. It's not coming up as my document. All right, so I apologize for the lack of visuals, but I will just run through some of the information in the PowerPoint, and I will make sure to share some relevant information in the chat so that people can get that information. So when we're talking about deed theft, the question is, well, what is deed theft? Deed theft occurs when somebody steals a title to somebody else's home without the homeowner knowing or consenting. So there's two types of deed theft. The first is forgery. So this is when the homeowner never signs a deed. Basically, a scammer takes a deed, fakes the homeowner's signature, and then gives that to the office of the city registrar or the county clerk, claiming that the homeowner signed it. The other way is fraud. So under fraud, usually the homeowner did sign over the deed, but they did that without realizing what they were signing. They were misled by scammers to believe that they were, going to get help to maybe modify their loan or help with some other homeowner issue. But what they really signed was their deed over to the scammer. And then the last kind of scam I want to talk about tonight is partition scams, which is, a scam that's related to deed theft. Basically, a partition scam is when properties might have a lot of heirs, particularly properties that have transferred within families for many generations. If there was no will or estate plan, there could be any number of heirs to a property. And so in a partition scam is when an investor goes and tracks up down, cousin John, who now lives in California, and gets him to sell his tiny little partial interest into the property, and then the scammer takes that partial interest back to New York, and then either tries to force a sale through the court or take over the property through that partial interest. So what homes are targeted by scammers? Often scammers target properties that are considered distressed. So this might be properties that are sitting empty. Scammers, often drive by properties. They might see where there's newspapers piling up, where there's repairs that need to be made. And so they might target those types of properties, thinking that nobody's taking care of it and it would be an easy property to get. They also target properties that might have a tax lien or other utility lien on it, or a property that's in foreclosure. So again, these properties are distressed. Scammers, one, they might be able to obtain information about the property and the owner through either public records, whether that's court records, whether that's lien sale lists. So scammers, one, get information from those lists, but they also know that the homeowner is facing financial distress. Maybe that makes the homeowner easier to scam because the scammer can try to offer them salvation or assistance. In reality, they're trying to scam them. Scammers also target properties where a homeowner has died and where there's not a legal transfer of title. So again, this is the partition type scams where there isn't a clear estate plan saying who is the subsequent owner of the homes. Those properties are vulnerable to scammers who try to get those properties. So tips for homeowners that I want to share with you all. So first, get help from your own attorney. Don't hire an attorney referred to you by someone who might have an interest in your property, such as a realtor. This is very important. In scams, we often see scammers tell a homeowner, oh, you won't need your own attorney. I'll have my attorney that I'll bring at closing. That just isn't logical. You hire an attorney to represent your interests. They can't represent your interest and somebody else's interest at the same time. So it's very important for you to have your own attorney. If you're going through something like a foreclosure or another issue and you can't afford an attorney, you should know about the homeowner protection program. I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But basically, HOP offers free legal services and housing counselors to New Yorkers when facing foreclosure. It operates throughout the state, and so it's a good place to go if you can't afford an attorney. The second tip is that legitimate organizations will not ask you to transfer your deed or promise that you'll be able to buy your property back at a later time. Again, this is a common scam we see for targeting homeowners in foreclosure or tax distress, where maybe a scammer will say, if you sign your deed over to me temporarily, I can negotiate better with the bank and I'll work it out, and then I'll be able to transfer the deed back to you. That never happens. It's a scam. They're doing it to steal the home. They have no intention to give it back to the homeowner. Again, any legitimate organization, you can hear from Alex in a bit, who's from a housing counseling organization or a legal services organization who supports homeowners. Alex would never say, hey, sign your deed to me temporarily. That would be ridiculous. So anyone who's asking you to sign your deed to them, that is definitely a red flag. The next tip is to read everything. Never sign anything you do not understand. Obtain a lawyer to review documents. Again, if you're in a situation where somebody's talking about selling your property or transferring your property, and they don't want to give you time to fully understand the documents that you are going to sign, that is a major red flag. Never sign anything you don't know what it says, especially related to your home. If they won't let you take those documents and say, I want to have an attorney look them over or my child look them over, that is really something to be wary of. Because again, anyone who's legitimately interested in working with you or interested in your property is going to let you review any documents with an attorney and make sure you completely understand what those documents include. Next tip, keep up with property payments, mortgage, property tax, utility payments. Again, if you're behind on these payments, your information might be able to get out there publicly through court records or other lists. And so it's better to avoid that to protect your property. But, things happen, people lose income, people get sick. So sometimes we fall behind. And if you fall behind, it's really important that you reach out for help as soon as possible. So you can reach out to HOP. You don't have to wait until you get a notice of foreclosure or until you get the tax lien sale information from the city. You can reach out to HOP and say, I'm falling behind and I want to know what help is out there. And then, next is to check your property records regularly. I will put some of this information into the chat in a bit. So what we just heard from Kieran, he talked about ACRIS, the automated city register information system. Basically, these are all property documents in New York City are on this website called ACRIS. And so you can look up your property and make sure, and see what's filed against it. And it's important to look up your property regularly and to, make sure that there's nothing there that you don't recognize. You can also sign up for alerts about legal changes on your property and in records being filed against your property through the recorded document notification system in the city. So currently the city will send a letter to the property if something is filed. Like if a new deed is filed on a property, the city will automatically send out a letter in the mail. But if you sign up through the recorded document notification program, you could add an email so that you get an email alert as well. You can also, maybe you can also identify somebody else, like maybe a child, an adult child, or an attorney who could get that notification as well. So, speed is of the essence when dealing with these kinds of scams. Knowing when something happens sooner and being able to take action sooner will save a lot of pain in the long run. So it's just really important that you are regularly checking your property records, or you sign up to this program so that you can know what's being filed on your property. And then the last tip I'm going to mention is estate planning. So estate planning is essential. You should, if you do not have an estate plan and you have a home, you should speak to an attorney about trusts, life estates, wills, etc. There's a lot of different options. And it's hard to say what might be right for you, but it is very important that you have a documented plan for your home, because if you don't, you are really leaving your home and your children or your other heirs vulnerable to these types of scams, because the scammers really target the homes that do not have a good estate plan or a good transfer of how the property is being passed on in the family. So one thing about estate planning in New York State, we now have a transfer on death deed. This is a special type of deed which you can, or a special type of document you can sign, basically, that says when you die, your home would automatically be transferred. The deed would automatically transfer on your death to whoever you indicate. This can be useful to some homeowners, especially if your home is really your only asset, because it's a pretty simple form. You only need to get it notarized, and it's fairly easy to change. So you just have to have that form, you get it notarized, you put it on ACRIS, and then that's in effect until you say, actually, I want to change that. I want to put somebody else on the transfer of death deed, or I now have a will, so I don't need it anymore. It's fairly easy to negate as well. So, what do you do if you're a victim of deed theft? And I think a few people are gonna go over this, but it doesn't hurt to hear it multiple times. So first is to file a complaint with law enforcement immediately. So either at the Office of the Attorney General or at your county DA. That would be the first start. Next, you should contact an independent attorney. Again, you need an attorney to represent you. If you're reporting it to law enforcement, like the DA or the AG, they're going to look at, did somebody break the law? But you might need to make other claims about your property or file other protections for yourself. So it's important that you also talk to an independent attorney. If you can't afford a private attorney, again, you should contact HOP, the Homeowner Protection Program, which offers free counseling and legal assistance. And then lastly, if you are being evicted in housing court by a scammer, so you have your title was stolen through deed theft, and now that scammer is trying to evict you, there's a new law, Real Property Actions Proceeding Law Section 756A. I can also put this in the chat. That basically it allows you to get a stay in the eviction proceeding for 90 days to give you time to file a case to reclaim your property from the scammer. And that's basically what I had. I had a page of resources that I was planning to leave up. I'll put these all in the chat, but like to go over them before you see them there. First, there's HOP, that's free legal assistance for homeowners and housing counselors for homeowners who are in distress. There's a hotline as well as a website. I also have the information for the New York State Attorney General's office, how you can either call the hotline or file deed theft complaints. The city registrar's office, which Kieran also shared the information for, the sheriff's office can also investigate deed theft complaints. And then I have the information about ACRIS and how to sign up for the recorded document notification program. So I'll put those all in the chat while the next person talks. But that's really all that I have. And again, I apologize for not being able to get my presentation to share on the screen.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And I just wanted to flag that I do see individuals asking for the PowerPoint, so we will work with Carrie to make sure that those individuals that ask will receive it. So, but for now, definitely do take advantage of the information that she will be adding in the chat. Okay, thank you so much again, Carrie. So we would like to move forward over to our next panelist, who has been a prosecutor for over 20 years. She is currently the acting bureau chief of the Frauds Bureau at the Queens District Attorney's Office. This bureau handles complex financial crime, including investment fraud, tax fraud, and elder fraud. I would like to open the table now to Anna Kim for her presentation.
Hi, thank you so much. And thank you to Senator Comrie for this. These events are extremely important so that people are aware of the kinds of scams that are out there and what you can do to avoid being a victim, which is today's presentation. Just going to put up the PowerPoint. Sorry. Oops, not that. Trying to get a read. Okay, hold on one second. Wait, not that either. Okay, you know what? Let me just hold on one second. Okay, here we go. My apologies. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you see the PowerPoint, Daquan?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to get right to it. According to the FTC, there were about 2.6 million reports of fraud in the past year or so, with over $12.5 billion lost. Elderly victims are typically underreported, meaning that they're victims and they don't report the crime. So these numbers are significantly lower. The top reported scams are imposter scams, online shopping scams, job scams, investment scams. But with the advancement of artificial intelligence, these numbers keep rising. But outreach and education programs such as this are very important to help people avoid becoming victims of fraud, because once you become a victim, it's very, very hard to get your money back. Also, according to the FTC, older adults tend to lose the most money, more than any other age group, specifically those in the age ranges of 60 to 69. And the main methods in which fraudsters or scammers will contact you, generally, it's always an email or a phone call. And third, it's followed by text. Unfortunately, it's very easy to be scammed because scammers will often manipulate the caller ID on your phone so that it looks like you're actually getting a phone call from a legitimate company or your bank. Scammers will send sometimes a spam email or text with a link that tells you to click on it. But what it does instead, it installs a malware into your phone or computer, which is used then to steal your money. So as I mentioned before, phone scams are one of the top methods. And usually I'm sure everyone has gotten a call that was fake from someone purporting to be your bank, saying that your account has been restricted, or there was an unauthorized transaction or overdue payment, even though it doesn't even seem like you necessarily conducted any transactions. We also get lots of complaints from people telling us that they got scammed by some online retailer or a delivery company, usually UPS or Amazon. And of course, we always get the government agency scams, someone calling you, telling you that they're from the IRS and that you didn't properly file your taxes, or you got more of a refund check than you were supposed to. These are just some various ways that people tend to get scammed. The USPS is one of the most impersonated government organizations. Scammers know that at any given moment, someone is expecting a package, especially during the holiday seasons, which is coming around the corner. And their one goal is to steal your money or your identity. And they do so by, like I mentioned before, downloading a malware where you click on a link. So what should you do if you get any unknown calls or any emails or text messages, especially with links? Make sure you pause before you act. Do not click on any link that you are not sure came from a legitimate source. Receiving a text or an email is not in and of itself harmful, but clicking on it could be. Don't respond to any text messages. This tips off to the scammer that your phone number is active, which could lead to even more spam. And what you should do instead is contact the organization that purportedly texted you through a verified trusted number, which you can get online, to confirm whether this transaction or whatever is being requested is legitimate. You can also, if you get any packages, track them through a legitimate source. USPS has a website where you can do so. And again, do not rely on your caller ID. Again, almost every fraudster we know are spoofing phone numbers. So be very careful when you get a number calling you that looks legitimate. Just verify on your own. And just very quickly, these are the 10 most impersonated companies in 2023. The numbers in 2024 are still kind of being compiled. But as you can see, these are the common players that we see constantly. Best Buy, Geek Squad, someone telling you that they need, you have some virus going on in your computer and there's a pop-up that comes up on your screen. That also happens with Microsoft, which is number 4. And of course, everyone seems to be using Amazon. And we get lots of people complaining about being scammed by people pretending to be from Amazon. But more importantly, especially when you get an alert from a bank, number 9 is Bank of America, number 10 is Wells Fargo. Be very concerned and make sure you independently verify that information. Now, romance scams, I'm just going to briefly go over that. We tend to get a lot of elderly victims coming forward indicating that they've been a victim of a romance scam, especially, people who are widows. They're lonely, they get a text message or a WhatsApp or whatever the case may be from a person. And before you know it, you're sending them thousands and thousands of dollars, and that person does not exist, and they are not the person that you thought that they were. In 2023, there were nearly 65,000 victims who reported being a victim of a romance scam, with over $1 billion that were lost to these types of scammers. So what should you do, or how do you avoid being a victim in the first place? Because that's key, is prevention. The common threads that we see in most of these cases is that the scammer who's texting you has always some reason to avoid meeting you in person or chatting you. The relationship moves very fast. They're suddenly telling you, wow, you have all that money. Let me tell you how you can invest it. And you're suddenly wiring, your life savings to this unknown person who lives in China. So you need to be very, very careful about these kinds of communications. Protect yourself. If they were refusing to meet you, say, well, I want to FaceTime you, or let's meet in person, because these scammers are not real, which is why they cannot meet you. If you start asking them detailed and specific questions about them, they start to get nervous, because now you're suspicious. So at times they will disappear, or they'll give you fake answers, but sooner or later you'll come to realize that this person is fake. But always just never send money to people that you do not know, that you've only met over on the internet. 9 out of 10 times these people are scamming you, and they are not real. So investment scams are part of romance scams. At times, they will try to tell retirees, widows, elderly people that, wow, you're sitting on so much money, you should invest your money and you're going to get such a high rate of return. And if it sounds too good to be true, it's because it's not true. It's fake. This is a total scam. So whenever you hear those, promises of higher rates of return with claims of very little risk, always be very, very skeptical and do your own independent research. One of the cases that we often get at the DA's office is the grandparent scams. These are the scams where some unknown perpetrator or scammer calls you pretending to be your grandchild, telling you that they're in trouble. They were either arrested and they need bail money, or they're at the hospital and they need to pay some kind of medical bill very quickly because it was an emergency. And the caller seems to sound like your grandchild. They seem to know intimate details about your grandchild, and you believe them because this is a very panic situation. The adrenaline is running, and you either wire the money, or a courier comes to pick up your cash. And when you finally get in touch with your real grandchild, you realize you've been scammed and that they're okay. So what are some things that you can do to avoid being a victim of a grandparent scam? Make sure, what we try to tell you to do is, with your loved ones, whether it's your child, your grandchild, create some kind of safe word to confirm their identity. So for instance, if you have a grandson, you can tell them, if it's going to be really you, we need to have a safe word such as, liberty. And that will confirm to each of us that you are who you say that you are. And if the person on the phone doesn't know your safe word, then you know that that person is a scam. This is especially a problem these days with increasing use of artificial intelligence. I'm sure you've seen in the news that AI is being used to mimic your grandchild's voice, which they can easily get on your grandchild's Instagram or Facebook account with a video. The scammers will take that voice and manipulate it to use to call you to get all this money. So make sure you do whatever you can to verify that that is in fact your grandchild. So I'm just kind of zipping through this with the limited amount of time that we have. The next portion is homeowner scams, which seems to be a recurring theme. And I'm not going to really repeat what the other two speakers said, because they had some great information and The only thing I would add is contractor scams are very rampant in Queens County. This is where some unknown men come to your home and they usually target the elderly. And they say that it looks like your roof needs to be repaired or your chimney needs to be repaired. And they say that they can fix it for a pretty good deal. Or they even kind of get you scared and say, well, if you don't fix this, we're going to have to report you to the Department of Buildings and they may take away your home. So they really get to you by scaring you with some level of threats or intimidation. And before you know it, you're handing them over tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these are not real builders or contractors, and they don't fix it. In fact, they make your home situation worse and they leave with your money. It's very hard to prosecute these cases. So this is why prevention is key. Do not accept solicitations to fix your home. You should always be looking to hire or consult with independent contractors and get, 2 or 3 estimates. With defraud, again, just check ACRIS. I would regularly check it to make sure that everything is in order. And if there are any issues, you can contact our office if there's evidence of a crime involved. But this is a very good system to make sure everything is okay. The email and pop-up scams were kind of mentioned at the beginning. This is an example of one that you might see on your computer saying that you need Windows support, but this is a scam. This is all linked to some virus that the scammers are going to install into your computer to basically control your accounts and withdraw your money. So do not click on any links. Do not call the number that's listed because that's going to be a scammer. Okay, so just make sure that you're doing your due diligence and never send them any money. That's just not something that Microsoft would be doing. And if you have any questions, speak to a loved one or call our office. We are happy to look at what you have and verify whether it appears to be legitimate or not. So identity theft is when someone uses your personal or financial information without you knowing about it to open up bank accounts, credit cards, steal your money, take out loans in your name, for many different reasons. What we always tell you is never provide your personal information to anybody that you do not know. Conduct regular credit checks. The 3 major credit agencies are TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. They allow you to, you can request a free copy of your credit report every 12 months from these 3 major credit agencies. And we always encourage you to avoid being a victim of identity theft is make sure that you're always checking your mail. You're removing it immediately from the mailbox because a lot of scammers will go to your mailboxes to steal your mail. That's how they obtain your personal or financial information. If you're getting some mail in your mailbox that looks like someone's using your address or your name to obtain loans or credit card information, that's usually a sign of identity theft. You need to immediately report that to the NYPD and freeze your accounts. You could freeze your credit. You could do that at 3 major credit agencies. But if you feel like you've been a victim of a crime, we encourage you to go to the NYPD. But also we always welcome you to come to our office to file a complaint. So there are many other signs that we encourage you to look out for. These are some of the signs. Always be skeptical. Don't be rushed into taking action. Look out for unusual payment requirements. Don't answer calls from unknown numbers. Never, ever share your personal information. There's very limited circumstances in which your social security number ever needs to be given to anyone. Review your statements, check your credit card, and of course, shred your documents because they get your mail. What to do if you're a victim? These are some ways. So you can contact us at our consumer fraud hotline or our elder fraud unit. We have a dedicated team who assists victims over 60 years old who've been a victim of a crime, or report it to your local police precinct. But just be careful and, always listen to your gut. And that's what I have right now.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for your thorough presentation. I definitely had to take some notes for myself as well. So thank you for that. Um,
course.
I would love to transition now to our next panel speaker, who is Alexander Niffenberg, who is the Deputy Program Director of the Consumer and Economic Advocacy Program at Build Up Justice NYC. Alexander and Build Up C handles complex foreclosure and bankruptcy cases, as well as some deed theft cases prior to joining the Brooklyn Corp A, currently frequently named. As a full-time, Alexander did practice pro bono at the organization, as well as worked in his law school community economic development clinic. He holds a JD from the Mercy A. Dean School of Law at Austria University and a BA in political science and sociology from the University of Toronto. Azar is admitted to practice in New York and the Eastern and Southern District Courts of New York. And I would like now to transition that over to Alexander for his presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just make sure I can share. Can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, thank you. And good evening, everyone. And thank you, Levin, for the introduction. So my name is Alex Knippenberg, and I'm a Deputy Program Director at Build Up Justice New York City. We changed our name recently. We used to be known as Brooklyn Legal Services Corporation A, but now we're Build Up Justice New York City. First of all, I would like to thank Senator Leroy Comrie for inviting us and participating in this webinar. I think this is very important, and I hope I can give you a lot of good information. And I would also like to thank all the previous speakers. I think the information was very important, and I hope all of you took good notes. Today, I'll be talking to you about deed theft. A lot of my presentation is gonna, mimic what Miss White said, but I'm gonna talk to you a little bit from a different side because, Miss White and her office investigates those fraudsters, and we often come into direct contact with those fraudsters through our clients, through our work. So some of my presentation is going to be similar, but I'm also going to talk to you about different things. And at the end of the presentation, if I have any time, I'm going to talk a little bit about the foreclosure process in New York and how the foreclosure process works. In New York, unfortunately, deed theft and foreclosure are very intertwined, and oftentimes when you are in foreclosure, that is when you fall victim to deed theft and vice versa. Not always, but often. So first, a little bit about my organization, Build Up Justice New York City. As mentioned, I'm a deputy program director. I mostly work, I defend homeowners in foreclosure litigation, and I do bankruptcy work. So in terms of foreclosure, if there's a foreclosure case filed against you or you need representation in court for foreclosure, we are free legal service provider, exactly what Ms. White was talking about in her presentation when she was mentioning HOP network or Housing Assistance Network. We're one of the free legal service providers. It doesn't mean that we will take every single case if you're in foreclosure, but anyone is free to reach out to us and talk to us and see if we can assist. And we also have a bankruptcy project where we, use our bankruptcy work to preserve home ownership through bankruptcy work. And we filed both Chapter 7 and 13, but the goal of our bankruptcy filings is to resolve your foreclosure issue and help you if you are in foreclosure. In addition to foreclosure bankruptcy work in our consumer economic program, we also do taxpayer work. So we don't file your taxes, but if you have an issue with IRS on your Department of Finance, we can assist you. And we recently opened up a wills and estate practice. I know there's going to be a private attorney following me who's going to talk about wills and estate. But I saw that there are a lot of questions in the chat about death on deed and how that works. In the end of the presentation, we will share our contact information. So anyone who's watching, they can reach out to us, or they can obviously reach out to the attorney who's going to follow me and talk about, wills and estates if they have any questions about death and deed transfer. All right, so, the first topic is deed theft and what is deed theft? I have this like legalese definition of what deed theft if that I put down, but we'll try to, dumb it down a little bit and determine like what is deed theft, how it occurs, and so on. So what I put down is unwitting transfer of property by homeowner to another party who through fraud or inducement obtained title, often occurring during times of financial distress for a homeowner. So there are a couple things to unpack here, but in general, a deed theft will occur when you transfer title of your house to another party, and most of the time you're not realizing that you're actually transferring, or it was done because of a fraud being committed. And a lot of the times, the reason why homeowners do it is because they're going through some kind of a financial crisis. Most often, from my perspective, what I see, they're going through foreclosure. But as Ms. White said, sometimes it can also be a partition action, or in general, some kind of financial crisis. But most often, it's someone who's going through a lot and they're looking for help. And unfortunately, those fraudsters take advantage of that. In my cases, when people are facing foreclosure, you know, a lot of the times it's the first time they encounter something like this. They don't know where to go, who to contact. And, all of a sudden somebody calls you up and says they can help you. And that's how they get you. It's how they take advantage of you. And, that's how people fall victims to this. And anyone can be a victim to this, not just, one person. So what are some of the common forms of deed theft? As I said, usually deed theft occurs when a homeowner is experiencing some kind of a financial crisis. Again, in my experience, most often being a foreclosure, but there are also others. How they do it is, so for example, when foreclosure case begins, all foreclosure cases are public record. Anyone can look up that case. Most court proceedings in New York are public record, except, some criminal and some matrimonial divorce proceedings. So in my experience, these scammers, what they do is they look up every single foreclosure case that's being filed in, whatever county. Then they look up all of the defendants, find their contact information, and then just start contacting people who are in foreclosure immediately. And then after they make the initial contact, they try to induce them somehow either into transferring the deed or something similar to this. We often see that because, these fraudsters, oftentimes are even the first people to talk to the homeowners who are in distress. The homeowners often, fall victims to them and end up doing things that they will later regret. Often, they will promise you things like a short sale, and often they will promise you like amazing loan modification or anything to resolve your foreclosure case. And then, they'll ask you to sign something, and then, the homeowner obviously wants to resolve their case, and they end up signing something that they shouldn't. If you are, in some kind of financial trouble, if you're experiencing foreclosure, the first step you should do is to, for example, reach out to Senator Leroy Comrie. Like his office is great, and they will put you up with either free legal service provider, free housing counselor, because all of the foreclosure services in New York can be free. We're a free legal service provider. There are a lot of other free legal service providers that can help you. Reach out to somebody like that. Don't, fall victim to somebody who just calls you or comes and knocks on your door and promises you unreasonable things. You might need a loan modification. You might need a short sale. It might actually be, the best resolution for you. But in my experience, a lot of those people don't even know how to do those things. And, if they don't know how to do those things, but they don't defraud you, at least there's that. But oftentimes they'll also try to take a lot of your money and try to take the equity out of your house and many other things. So what are some of the warning signs that, someone is actually trying to commit deed theft or some kind of other fraud against you or something similar to that. Like Miss White said, if you're working with us, we will never ask you to sign anything over to us. We will never say, oh, just sign the home and we'll later return the deed or something similar to that. If the offer is too good to be true, it probably is. I can say that most of the people that I represent in foreclosure, almost every single one of them gets a scam letter. And oftentimes, my clients don't recognize that it's a scam, but they do the right thing. The first thing they do is they reach out to me and they say, hey, Alex, I got this letter. What is this? I don't understand it. And 99.9% it's a scam. If they promise you're going to get a 2% interest rate forever, or if the bank is going to forgive half of your debt, or oftentimes they try to cite some kind of a federal law saying because of this new law passed you need to reach out to us immediately and we'll be able to forgive half of your loan. Like, if it's too good to be true, it's probably a scam. Like, no mortgage company, and I've done this for a long time, and no mortgage company in their right mind will just forgive half of your debt or do anything like that. And, as I said, if it's too good to be true, it's definitely a scam. But please, like, if you get some mailing and you're not sure what it is, just reach out and talk to someone. There might be something in it, but don't just call them over. I mean, you can call them over and ask them questions. That's sometimes something that I do. For example, last week, one of my clients got one of those letters, and I told her immediately there was a scam, but then I called them up. They actually hung up on me after I started talking to them and started asking them all the questions about their letter and what they're doing. So you can do that, call them and ask them a lot of questions and see how they respond. And if you ask too many questions, they probably also just going to hang up on you. If it does not smell good, it's probably not good. Another sign is, unsolicited offers. I often see, people just, coming to houses and knocking on doors. How do they know you're in foreclosure? As I said, it's all public record and they can look it up. They look up property addresses and then they just go and, they say incorrect things. Again, almost every week, not every couple of weeks, my clients call me and they say, somebody came to my door. They told me my house is going to be sold next week. Is that true? It's never true, but that's how they try to scare you. Foreclosure is a very long process in New York. Yes, eventually the mortgage company can foreclose on your house and your property can be auctioned off. But I've seen cases that can go for 10 years. If your case just began, there's no way your house can be auctioned off so soon. But that's how these scammers get advantage of you. They know you're in foreclosure and they tell you, we know you're foreclosure, so you start believing them. Then they say, oh, I see that in 2 weeks your house is going to be auctioned off, only I can help you. And then if you haven't talked to anyone, you haven't talked to a legal services attorney or a housing counselor or anyone, you think nobody can help you and then you're going to lose your house in 2 weeks. You panic, and obviously we can see how people become victims. Just, if somebody tells you it's going to be auctioned off, just make sure to double check with somebody who's legitimate and somebody who's an actual attorney and who has your best interest in mind and not someone who's trying to, steal the deed to your house and then take advantage of you in that way. Chances are, they're not there to help you. And, I can't guarantee, like, if you reach out to us, that we take on every single case. But at least, if I see, oh, there's nothing we can do for you, that's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to be honest with you. But I'll review your case truthfully and tell you how your case is going and what can be done if you're in foreclosure or if you're in any other, proceedings like that. Another one is false association with established lenders. Oftentimes, like when my clients speak to them, people will say, "Oh, yeah, I have a relationship with Chase, or I have a relationship with PHH Mortgage or Bank of America. I have an insight in there. It's another way they try to, get you to work with them and get you to do something on their behalf. So, how can you prevent and what can you do to not fall and not be a victim of deed theft? Miss White talked, pretty substantially about some of those things. One of the things she mentioned, make sure to sign up for ACRIS notifications. If anything is ever recorded in ACRIS, you should get a paper notification. And actually, again, to bring up my clients, but it happens to them all the time. If I resolve my client's case successfully, for example, and they get a loan modification, oftentimes the lender is going to record this loan modification on ACRIS. And oftentimes my clients will reach out to me because, oh, I just got this notification. What is this? And I explain it to them. But it's good that they reach out because it's a document that they don't understand. It might not be a bad document. It might not be anything negative on your property, but they're taking precaution. They're getting something in the mail saying something was recorded on ACRIS, and they're trying to contact right away to see, oh, what is this? And everyone should sign up and try to take advantage of this program just to see, if anything is being done. Ask a lot of questions, like I was saying before. You get a letter you don't understand, call them, ask a lot of questions. If it smells fishy, please don't do it. If somebody, if you don't know who the legal services attorneys are, or if you don't know who the housing counselors are, Senator Comrie, you are attending this webinar, so you have their contact information. Reach out to them. They'll put you up with somebody who knows they're talking about. They'll give you a referral and give you a phone number or an email where you can reach out and talk to any of us. And, we'll provide you with correct information and try to at least guide you and tell you, oh, is this legit or is this not legit? Consult with somebody trusted if you're going through foreclosure or anything related to that. And just don't trust if somebody calls you out of the blue or if somebody, just comes knocking to your door and promises you unreasonable things. What can happen if you transfer the deed? At this point, you're kind of like too deep into it. You've already transferred the deed to a scammer. It doesn't mean, that it's over and you can't get it back. There are many things that you can do. As Miss Y was talking, and then as Miss Kim was talking, one thing you can do is you can submit complaints to both AG and DA, and they'll investigate the matter. You can also hire your own private attorney, and we don't do this work that often, but we do this work sometimes. You can file your own, action to try to get the deed back, and there will be a civil action, as opposed to a DA can start a criminal action against the fraudsters. But the DA cannot take on every single case. There's a statute of limitation, and there are a lot of other things associated. So, for example, if the DA cannot take on a case, you still have your own private right of action, and you can still sue the scammer and describe how you were scammed and ask the civil court judge to give you the deed back. And you can always do that. I mean, subject to some limitations, but it's on case by case cases. What can the scammers do against you? I mean, they can start eviction proceedings against you, but if you're in housing court, you can, make you should have a lot of defenses to prevent the eviction. What they most often do is they take out a bunch of loans on the house and just pocket their money. They don't care that they don't make any payments on the mortgage and the loans that they take out because they don't care what happens to the house. The point for them is just to take a bunch of loans and pocket this money. And then, they don't live there. And some other things that I've seen is some of the victims, if it's a multiple unit house, the scammers will often rent out the other units and collect rent and then not do anything about the foreclosure or anything like that, and then pocket the money that way. I think I'm in the end of my time. I'll put the contact information. So we're Build Up Justice New York City, free legal service provider. I didn't get to talk about foreclosure, but if anyone has any questions or any additional information, feel free to call us or email us at this website. And I'm also going to be available at the end to answer some questions, I think. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Alex, for that presentation. Definitely share the information about the foreclosure part within the chat if you can. Just wanted to make sure that everyone has all the information that they came for today. So with that said, thank you again, Alex. We would like to pivot to our next panelist, Mr. Everett Hopkins, which Everett Hopkins Law Group is a firm whose history has begun in 1990, which has become a staple within our community. Everett Hopkins' career, he served with a distinction for 8 years as the general counselor and director of administration for the New York City Criminal Justice Agency. Prior to his position, he held a key positions with New York Housing Preservation Development for the enlargement of the affordable housing and with the Internal Revenue Service Enforcement Division. He currently serves as the chairman of both the Black Spectrum Theater in Queens, the Beck and B. Allen Black Bar Association, and as a member of the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Judiciary. His office routinely counsels and litigates matters in real estate, law, probate, wills and estates, landlord and tenant and guardianship. And now I would like Saskia to take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'd like to thank all the panelists. There's a lot of great information. Senator Comrie, I also like to really thank you for allowing people to come to us, or pardon me, for me to come to them before they come to all of us, because generally it's a good thing if we can talk to them before problems occur. So while I could talk about this all night, I'll try to keep it in the realm of supporting what the prior speakers have talked about, especially when it comes to fraud and especially when it comes to real estate. But I do want to talk about a couple of things, and it'll be wills and certainly trusts, because those are the things that we really need to focus in at this time. I'll see whether or not I can figure out how to share my screen. And if you give me just a moment, I think I did it. I don't know. Can you see anything? Hold on. Let me try again.
Not yet. There you go.
Okay. It's just an outline that keeps me on track, and then you'll have time for questions later on. So again, I'd like to talk about two things, which really are wills and then trusts. Now, while I'm going to talk about wills, I'm also going to let you know that it's a good thing to have, but not the only thing to have. And while you want it, you want to put yourself in a place to not have to use it. Now, I'll explain what I mean by that. But let's talk about what a will is and what it really means, all right? And what a will is a written document. And I want everybody to understand that in the state of New York, you have to have a written document, not videotape, not voice recordings. Those are not really valid here in the state of New York. You have to have a written document which is signed before two witnesses who indicate at the time that you're of clear mind, able to read and write, converse in English language, not suffering from any defective sight, hearing, speech, or anything which affect your ability to make a valid will. So it has to be attested to by two witnesses. And I make that clear because very often you find people who go on the internet and try to do a will. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And it's not that those forms in and of themselves are the problem. Most of the time, most people don't execute it in the right fashion where it'll stand muster through the probate court. So I say, wills generally don't cost a lot of money. Most lawyers don't make money on wills. They make money on probating wills, but not so much on wills. And it's usually worth your time to consult with an attorney so you can ask questions and make sure that the document is executed in the right fashion. So let's talk about who inherits if you don't do a will. Well, if you don't do a will, then it's not up to you who inherits. And generally, who will inherit is, if you're married, your spouse. And if you have children, your children. So your spouse and children will generally inherit if you have no will. However, that means they'll have to go through a lot of steps to get there by filing a probate petition and then establishing that there are no other family members and establishing they are your children and your spouse. If you have no children, then alter your spouse. If you have no spouse, alter your children. If you have neither, then it expands who can actually inherit. Then it goes to your parents. And most people at the time they pass away, parents have predeceased them, so then it will go to their brothers and sisters. And if they have no brothers and sisters, then it will go down to the survivors of their brothers and sisters, who could be their, and most likely their children or the nieces and nephews of the decedent. And that may not be and probably won't be what you want. But without a will, the process becomes longer and generally more expensive, because now it's no longer probate, which is with a will. It becomes an administration. And when it becomes administration, the bar is just a little higher in establishing who actually is your family members. And all of this will be, we'll talk about later on how to get around all of that. But the reason I say you should do a will is because a will is really like an insurance policy of you stating who your family is and who you want to get something, although there's other ways of giving it to them. But the will is the fail-safe. It's like an insurance policy that if there's anything you forget to dispose of in a different way, then your will certainly answer how it is to be disposed of. So again, the will stands there just in case you don't give property away in other ways. So for instance, I always talk about something called testamentary substitutes. What does that mean? That means that you should name beneficiaries, especially on any financial vehicle that you have. Any saving account, you should put beneficiaries on, who you want to receive if you were to pass away. Okay, if certainly you do it with life insurance policies, your pension plan, your 401k, you should always try to name people, because by naming them, whatever's in those vehicles will pass to them automatically without ever having to step into a courtroom. So I would go home, take a look at what you have. Look at whether or not the pension plan you have, there's survivor benefits, 401k plan, of course, bank accounts, whatever there is that you have. And I understand I'm talking to seniors, and I think it's very important that you do that, because you save them so much trouble and expense, because at that point, all they have to produce is a death certificate. And by doing that, it actually goes around having to probate a will or it falling into administration without a will. So when you name beneficiaries, so I'm clear on these vehicles, it trumps probate and administration. It will go to that person irrespective of what your will says. All right. So I urge you to really take a look at that. Another thing you should know, that if you have a will and you did a will years ago, and at the time you did the will, and that you are no longer married to that person, the legislature has found a way to protect people in that position. Now, if you become divorced, the legislature has passed laws that say that any disposition to a former spouse is no longer valid, which is a good thing. However, I do see situations where people want to leave things to their former spouse. And if that's the case, then you must re-execute a will or name them as a beneficiary on something. Because we have situations where people are divorced, but they still share a good relationship and they share children. And if something were to happen, they would still want that ex-spouse to inherit. And in doing that, that means you must re-execute a will. If you do nothing, they certainly will not, which is generally the rule. All right. So once again, take time, name beneficiaries on everything. Now, a last will and testament is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a living will. It's a little different. So I don't want to confuse those things. A living will is a will that addresses what you want to see happen, basically with you, if you were to become ill or infirm. And the living will would state something to the effect that do not resuscitate. If you become an incurable, irreversible condition where there's no reasonable expectation that you will recover, do not give you any artificial hydration or nutrition. So if you get to a point where you say, well, let me go and not do anything else, you would do what is called a living will. And with that living will, you would also execute what is called a proxy, a healthcare proxy. And the healthcare proxy would appoint the person who would be in charge of communicating with the doctors on what your wishes are, healthcare provider, or whomever, or in any situation when it concerns your health, that they have the absolute right to take a look at your medical records and to talk to your doctors about a course of treating you through your illness. So that's exactly what you should consider when you go to see an attorney regarding probate and winding up your affairs. But once again, I say a will is a great thing to have, but I'm telling people in the future not to rely on it, which we're about to come to, which is trust, which I really think is a much more solid vehicle that will protect you. So if you can understand what I'm saying, what I'm tired of seeing and why I'm glad we're having this meeting tonight is people walking into my office after mom and dad have passed away and realizing that they believe that mom and dad had left them something. Usually it's around real estate, which is what we're talking about a lot tonight, and finding out that there now has been a Medicaid lien placed on their estate. And that Medicaid lien will affect the property. I've seen Medicaid liens as high as $800,000, and that can be avoided. Where's the Medicaid lien come from? Now, I'm not talking about Medicare. Medicare is something that everyone receives when they get to be 65 years of age. Now, Medicaid is something different. That's when you need additional help, where you may need someone to come to your home to care for you a couple of times a week or even every day, or you end up in a facility, a senior care facilities, senior citizen home, however you want to call it. Now, when that happens, most facilities will work to try to qualify you for Medicaid. And in many situations, you will get Medicaid. But what the senior citizens homes are not good at doing is telling you that this is not free, especially if you have assets. So what will happen is any assets that you've acquired over the years can be lost. I call it the fourth quarter fumble. And to some of those of you who are football fans, if you watch Monday Night Football with Washington and Chicago, you saw a fourth quarter fumble. Washington fumbled and they lost the game. Well, I'm here to tell you, I don't want you to lose the game and create the fourth quarter fumble. So what does that mean? It means setting up your estate so that in the future, whatever you've acquired over the years, you do not lose at the end of your life. Now, for most people, that's at least putting their real property in a trust. For most people, they've paid off their mortgage toward the end of their life, unless they decide to refinance for a particular reason. And they now have this beautiful home that's worth quite a bit of money that you want to pass on to your children. And simply by creating a trust, you can not only avoid probate. So let's go back for a minute. Remember, a will is good for deciding where all your assets go. You can say, I want my money to go in this account to this person or that person, or spread it up amongst all my children. You can say, I want my home to go to this child or to a group of children. You can say all of those things if you still own them, okay? Now, with a trust, you actually, and I know this is the big step for everybody, you relinquish ownership and put it into a trust under your name. All right, so if your name is Jane Doe, it'd be the Jane Doe Trust. But I'm going to speak to you first about the irrevocable trust, because that's the trust that helps everyone. An irrevocable trust is a trust where you transfer money or real property or cars or whatever it is that you like into this trust. By transferring into the trust, you no longer own it. Nobody does. The trust does. But the trust reads like a will, because the trust can say that whatever money is in the trust be divided up among several individuals or one or to a child. It can say that the home should be sold or must be sold, or you can say your child or children can live in it for a certain amount of time, then it's sold and the proceeds divided up. Now, what does that do? First, let's go back to comparing it with a will. There's absolutely no probate, all right? With a will, remember this, in administration, no matter what you do, especially with a will, although you do a will can always be challenged. And that's what many people don't see or understand. It doesn't matter how clear your will is, your will can be challenged by anyone, and I want you to understand this, who would receive if you did not have a will. So for instance, if you wrote a will and you only gave to 2 children or 1 child instead of 3, the other children could challenge the will. And they could challenge the will simply by saying that maybe you weren't competent at the time that you signed the will, or they believed you just didn't sign the will. Now, whether or not they're right, it will be entertained by the court. That's why probate gets held up very often, because people challenge the process. It doesn't mean they'll win. Now, I can honestly tell you, if a will is prepared by an attorney, the chance of the will being overturned is not good at all, probably 1%. However, the process could drag on for years. And people very often settle because at that time, people are very much stressed out by the death of someone and care not to fight over money the whole time. So that's one of the drawbacks to having a will, that the very process of it opens up a challenge. So for instance, if you have a will and you've left out a family member who would inherit, whether it's a child, whether it's a spouse, whether it could be an aunt or uncle, based on who's left in your family who's still alive, they have the right to challenge it. In fact, the process lends itself to actually sending them a document that says, do you agree that the person who was nominated to probate this will can proceed? Not that they agree with the will, but do they agree that the person can proceed? If they do not agree, you will then have to get a process server to serve them with a citation. That's with a will. And they can still challenge the will. And once again, I say, if it's prepared by an attorney, chances are they won't win, but it will take a lot of money to fight it, or more money than it should, and it will take a long process. With administration, it opens itself up the same way, where it asks for waivers by those who would inherit, and if not, they can challenge it. And I've been through and litigated enough of these cases to know the difficulty simply because of the high volume of cases in the courts, especially here in Queens, had a very high volume after COVID that has simply delayed the process. Now, let's fast forward to trust. With a trust, there's no court proceeding. Now, the truth is, someone could try to create one, but the chances of it going anywhere are 0. The other thing about it is that there's no process to open up a challenge. Someone would have to create it. So the trustee can move along unfettered and do what they have to. If real property is in it, they can sell the real property if that's what the trust calls for. The trust calls for the property should be held for a certain amount of years to allow people to get themselves on their feet. That can be done too. You can also decide it goes to 1 child or 2 children or to someone else who they don't want to, whoever they decide for it to go to. Now, the cherry on top of the icing for the trust is not only does it avoid the cost of probate, it protects the property. Now, with regards to Medicaid, and other creditors, not simply Medicaid, once the real property is in the trust, and it's in the trust for 5 years, that's why you have to plan ahead. You can't transfer your property into a trust today and then try to avoid creditors, including Medicaid, tomorrow. You have to do it 5 years ahead of time. Now, for inheritance purposes, if you put it in the trust, if something were to happen to you the next day, the trust was valid for distributing it for estate purposes. To avoid creditors, the government wants to know that you've put the property and money into a trust at least 5 years ahead of time. Once you do that, it is treated as though you don't own it. So you could end up going into a nursing home and Medicaid would end up covering the costs and not touch any of the property in the trust. Now, there are some restrictions to income in getting Medicaid, but that's for a whole different discussion and beyond the time period we would have here this evening. However, I do advise that people use trust as often as they can as an irrevocable trust. So if you put trust in your property in a trust today, in the year 2030 or 31, depending on what month you do it in, that if you ended up going into a nursing home, anything you put in the trust would not be used by the government to pay any of your costs there or to come back and reclaim it later on. And I'm glad to see that people are beginning to use that tool by putting quite a bit of money into a trust. Now, when you apply for Medicaid, or if you're at a point where you had to apply for Medicaid, what they will tell you is that whatever money is not in the trust, you will have to spend. They're pretty good at making you do what's called a spend down. So for instance, if you had a couple of $100,000 or $100,000 laying around, you would spend down to a certain amount. And then from that point, Medicaid would begin to pay. But just remember, if you put that money in 5 years ahead of time, you don't have to spend any of it and you would qualify and move on. Now, for all of you who are homeowners, one of the things I want you to do also is go and take a look at your deed, all right? Because what I often see is that people have deeds, and believe it or not, sometimes they forget whose name is on the deed. They may have bought the property 30 years ago and had a friend or a cousin sign for them and forget that they're on there. And I urge you to take a look at that and to cure those things as soon as you could, because I have had a number of occasions where a client will come in, mom and dad have passed away, and a friend they had 40 years ago name is on the deed because they helped them sign on the mortgage that many years ago and everybody forgot about it. Well, now that property is shared with that person, and that family, if that person is no longer alive, may not be so let's say, workable and turn the property over to you, although your parents or friend or loved one may have paid for it. So I urge you to go look at your deeds and make sure that only you are on it or your parents are on it and not someone you're not aware of. The other thing I should also remind you of is that there's different ways to own real property, okay? Real property can be owned by something called tenants in common, which means each person owns their section of the property or a portion of the property. So let's say you have 4 names on the property as tenants in common, or 2. If you have 2 names, that means each person owns their 50%. If it's 4, it means each person owns 25%. Now, what does it mean as your tenants in common? That means if one of those people pass away, their share falls into their estate and belongs to whoever their family is at the time of their death or whoever they will it away. Now, there's sometimes you want the deed to do that, where you want everybody to own their share so they can leave it to their loved ones. But often that is not the case. But there's another way people can own property together, but make sure it passes on to the survivor of whoever it is. And that's called joint tenants with right of survivorship. So let's say you have A, B, C, and D, all as joint tenants with right of survivorship. If A passes away, then B, C, and D own it. If B passes away, then you have C and D. C passes away, then only D owns it. All right. And again, urge you, whether you decide to transfer your property into a trust or not, that you take a look at those D's to make sure you know how you own the property if you own it with somebody else. And I see a lot, quite often where family members do own property together. What does that mean if one of you passes away? By the way, similar when it comes to divorce, because what I find very often is that while divorced couples may split up everything, they never really deal with the real property. They leave it the way it is, Usually they leave it the way it is because there's a mortgage on it and it hasn't been refinanced to take one of the parties out. So although you're divorced, when one passes away, then that estate has to be dealt with. And if the surviving spouse is no longer married to him, then there may be an issue with dealing with the estate and who the predeceased spouse loved ones are. Something to strongly be considered. So with regards to going back to the trust, I urge everyone to really consider those. Now, the types of trusts there are one is irrevocable. Well, there are many type trusts, but the one we're going to talk about this evening is the irrevocable and revocable trust. Now, again, the irrevocable trust avoids creditors from coming in and going after the premises upon death. If you have a lot of medical bills, whatever, at the time of death, they can't go after the property, as well as Medicaid come back and reclaim it. The problem with irrevocable trust, well, I won't call it a problem. I'll say the challenge with it is you have to give up control to the trustee. Most of the time, though, people give up control to their children, and hopefully you'll trust your child. Well, what I often say is, well, trust your child or trust the government. Which would you rather do? So if you're able to name a child, because everyone can't be a trustee, but a child can for purposes of protecting assets, and you name them as a trustee, then they would be in charge of your real property. They would be the one who has to sell it, refinance it. Now, it doesn't mean the trustee can do whatever they want. That's not how this works at all. The trust reads what the trustee is supposed to do. So they can't just do anything they want to. They have to abide by what the trust say. So the trust will say that you can live in the property for 5 years. I have to tell you that because that avoids the Medicaid lien from affecting the property in the future. So years ago, what people did is create what was called life estates. And generally people did life estates in property because they were cheaper. What I mean by that is people would transfer the property back to themselves for life so that their name was on the deed. And then they would name the other people who were to receive the property at the time of death. The only problem with that is that the life estate does have a value. And for Medicaid purposes, if you simply have a life estate and you end up going in a nursing home, you still may be assessed some money which the government can come back for because your life estate, with your name being on the deed only for life, still has a value. So generally, it's not the best way to do it, although people have done it that way. So, and a deed to be transferred at the time of death has its benefits. I will tell you that. And I believe a lot of people will do it because it does cost less than setting up a trust. However, I have not seen it challenged with regards to, although I think it may be coming with regards to Medicaid purposes and whether or not a creditor may be able to claim against it. So I still consider the trust at this time to be the best action. Now, a revocable trust is a little different because you can revoke it. Now, irrevocable trust, you can't revoke. Once you put it in your property and money in it, it's in there. Money and property, it's in there. With the revocable trust, you can revoke it. The only problem with it, it doesn't have the protection. You maintain the control, and some people feel better that way, but the whole point is you want to be able to have a lot of control. If you want a lot of control over your property, you're concerned about it, I do understand you're going with the revocable trust, but you don't get the protection. And I urge you to, once again, consider that. I think my time is up, unfortunately. I'd like to go into a few other things, but just want to let all know, make sure you go home, look at your financial instruments, look to see who you left beneficiaries on. Take the time to really do that. Look at your deed. Make sure you know who's on the deed, okay? Because I have a lot of situations where people do forget who's actually on the deed. I also want to take a moment to thank the Department of Finance who's on here for now recognizing trusts. In the past, I say maybe 10 years ago, we had a lot of problems when we would do transfers from people into their trusts where they would lose their exemptions and then they had to apply to get them back. The Department of Finance has done a great job in the last, I say, 5 years or so, looking out for these transfers and making sure people don't lose their exemptions overnight. With regard also to the issue of getting notifications, it's a great thing coming from the Department of Finance. Although I do want to tell you that there's a company, if you ever do a deed transfer, who will write you, and it looks like it's coming from the city of New York, where they say you can pay them about $100 to get a certified copy of your deed. Please ignore that. You can get a copy of your deed by going on to Acris and printing it out. If you need a certified copy, you go down to the Department of Finance and pay a few bucks. You don't pay anybody $100 to give you a copy of your deed. And generally, certified copies are not that not necessary in most situations. The last thing I want to talk about also, when it comes to fraud and preventing theft of real property, I do believe trusts do help quite a bit. Most of the situations I've had to litigate with regards to fraudulent transfers have come after the death of someone, where these people do look to see who passed away. They look in surrogate court, see who passed away, see what property they own. And I've had situations where the deceased person, someone has actually impersonated the deceased person and transferred the property to an investor. And there's ways to do that because there is a loophole in the law that allows title companies to accept affidavits that people are survivors of deceased people on deeds. And they use that loophole actually to commit fraud. I know my time's up now, and I thank you very much.
Thank you so much again, Mr. Hopkins, with this thorough and detailed presentation. I really have some notes that I've taken on myself. But we want to transition into the Q&A portion. And thank you for those who were the panelists that were actually answering the questions through the duration of the webinar, and for those who still have questions at this time. So again, we're going into our Q&A segment. So if you do have any questions, please make sure that you're using the chat, the Q&A section to make sure that we have that. We do have a few questions that I wanted to put the attention to Mr. Hopkins. This was raised by Marsha Coleman about should insurance policies be added to the trust, if you wanted to expand out on that. Oh, you're muted.
If you're asking about life insurance policies, yeah, it's a good idea to have life insurance policies if they're looking to have multiple people. Well, let me back up a minute. I'll give you a good example of how life insurance policies are used in a trust. I've had situations where someone wanted to have a child or children taken care of with the life insurance policy over time, but not give them the entire policy. In that case, they named the trust as the beneficiary of the policy. The trust then outlined how the policy should be used. So for instance, there may be a child who's going through college that they didn't want to hand them the whole policy amount. And the trustee would then divvy out the policy over time to pay for their education, to pay for their room and board, and to make sure that they don't waste the money. So if they're speaking about life insurance, I would say, yeah, they can use it that way. Remember, you can name a person or a few persons and it goes directly to those few persons. But if you want some control over that money in the future, then they would direct that the policy be paid to the trust, and the trust would do whatever the trustee would do whatever the trust tells them to do with it. With regards to property insurance, if you transfer your home into a trust, I would say you would rename the hazard policy on the property in the name of the trust as well, so that the trust would be paid. If that answers the question.
Thank you for expanding upon that. And I do have a question that is similar. The attendee was Ms. Yvette SB was asking about the 401k. I think it's like similar as well, correct? With the including that in the trust.
Yeah. Again, well, see, 401k, you have to be careful. Remember now, with a 401k which has value now. The reason why people would want to transfer it to the trust is to try to shelter it for the future. But remember, with 401ks, when you redesignate the name of it, because you could leave the money exactly where it is, you're just now saying it's in my name. It's in the name of the trust under my name. However, that in all likelihood constitutes a withdrawal, which means then there's a tax consequence. And you have to consider that. So when you transfer, remember, non-tax money, when you're redesignating it or retitling it, as certain people say, then you face a tax consequence. And I would talk with whoever your financial planner is to take a look at what the tax consequence will be. Now, that being said, there are people who still do it because they say, I'd rather protect the money and pay the taxes on it because I don't need it. I get enough income now. I want to save it for my children, so on and so forth. And I want to protect it in case I go into a nursing home. But you just have to be clear that there are tax consequences with transferring certain money.
Thank you. I also have a follow-up question for you, Mr. Hopkins, about can you change the trustee in your revocable trust?
Yes, you can. I forgot to cover it. Good question. You can change your trustee. So if you're a trustee, you can amend the trust to change the trustee. You can also change who receives and what they receive under the trust. Can't revoke it if it's irrevocable, but you can change who's in charge. So in short, you can fire the trustee. Yes, you can.
Okay. Thank you so much. I do have a few questions, and I believe they're for Department of Finance, Kieran. Stephanie is asking about how do we get the applications for the reduced property taxes? Will it be live available? You could answer that.
So the filing period will be opening just within a few weeks with the new applications. This should be available within the next week on our website.
Thank you. So I do have a question, and it's going back to Mr. Hopkins. It's about the adding real property from other states in the revocable trust. What's the procedure for that? I did get that from it's a question from an attendee here.
Well, wherever you set up your trust, if it's a New York trust here and you're a resident of New York, you can add property from another state because it's still your trust. Okay. The only question, and I would say, always consult local counsel in that state to see if there's any advantage to having the trust in that state, meaning if they have a residence there. But to the specific question, can you add a trust to your trust here in New York for property outside of New York State? Yes. But remember, you still have to do the deed transfer in that state. And you would either get an attorney or a title company in that state to transfer the property into the trust.
Thank you for the clarification. And I am looking to see if we have any more questions. Seeing none, thank you. I don't see any hand raised, but no. Seeing none, thank you all so much. I would like to say thank you and see if we could get a closing remarks from Senator Leroy Comrie.
Yes, thank you, Taquan, for hosting and doing such a great job as the MC this evening. I want to thank all of the participants and all of the presenters. I just want to remind our constituents that we will be available to link you up with all of these presenters if we have any follow-ups. I believe you went through all of the Q&A, Daquan, so that was taken care of. So thank you all for your questions. Please understand that whatever happens, there is always an answer. There's never a bad question. So, the more questions that you ask about your situations, and things are evolving every day. There's different new rules that will be probably being promulgated in the next year. So we need to make sure that we are stay abreast of it. But also, please do not give your Social Security number or your personal information to anybody that just blind emails you or scams you or calls you rather, or contacts you by text, especially because there's a lot of text scams happening as well. At least once a day, I'm getting a text scam from somebody saying that I purchased a product and I need to verify my details with them. So be very careful, folk out there, even if it's a utility company scam, because those are text scams that are happening as well. So everyone, please be aware. And again, thank you to all of the presenters today. Thank you to my staff. Everyone have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator, for those words. And I just want to make sure that all participants are aware that we'll make sure that we follow up with email with all the resources that were shared tonight. So please do be on the lookout for all those details. Again, thank you so much for your panelists for being here, for sharing such an incredible information with us today. And I hope that all the attendees were able to absorb all this information that was provided. Again, thank you all so much for attending and enjoy the rest of your night.